Hi, I'm Zach, and Kristiane has invited us at TV Apex to discuss her latest book, From MTV to Mecca. It's a very interesting memoir chronicling her journey from being a media personality to a spiritual person devoted to Muslim Sufi practices. Kristiane, it was a real pleasure to read your book.
Thank you.
And the first question that came to my mind is that you're a very young woman. Why did you write your memoir this time in your life, even though you've had a very rich life?
Thank you so much. You know what? I was actually asked to write my book already when I quit MTV. But I always felt I didn't have enough to say at that point. You know, I hadn't really arrived where I wanted yet. I felt it was futile to just recite all the parties I've ever been to with the rock stars, you know, because I was a presenter on MTV Europe, so for some that was interesting enough, but because I was already, had already become a Muslim, just as I was finishing MTV, I felt I hadn't really arrived yet. So now, quite a few years later, I thought it was about time. You know, the book is already over 400 something pages long. If I waited any longer, I don't think people would be able to just, digest an encyclopedia. So this is just, it's a beginning, and it just felt right to do it now.
That's true. I think what struck me about this book, first of all, is its honesty and the capacity that you have to refer to yourself in a third person. There's a tremendous amount of wisdom in the book. What I would like to know essentially is that when you were looking through your lives, what were the joys or the regrets? What specific instance took it out for you?
You mean on MTV or in general?
And your whole life, beyond. Just, what really, if you had to talk about a passage or a passage of time, what's the definitive moment of your life?
Well, I suppose, it was around the time when I found Islam, I, first of all, perhaps I need to tell you why I wrote the book, because, I was a presenter on MTV Europe, interviewing rock stars for a living, and, living the high life, enjoying red carpet treatment wherever I turned up with my little camera team. We were very famous in Europe. MTV was all the rage at the time. And I hosted massive music programs, teenagers collapsing when they saw their star turn up on stage. One time, talking about a highlight, I hosted it in front of 70,000 people. I was just thrown on stage as Prince, just before Prince came on to explain some kind of a competition. And, and we had a lot of highlights. I ran in the Olympics. I carried the amateur flame for MTV. I went to the music video awards, and met all the great stars, really, of the 90s. So it was a very special time. But something was missing, and I didn't really know what it was. I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. But basically, when a few years later, when I converted to Islam, a very negative press campaign followed, and I became a victim of Islamophobia. And, I was presenting a youth show at the time in Germany, and as we were celebrating the 100th episode, one journalist asked me, "So have you converted yet for your boyfriend?" My boyfriend happened to be Imran Khan at the time. I never said to anybody I had a boyfriend, because in Islam, there is no boyfriend and girlfriend. It's either marriage or nothing. So, and I wasn't a Muslim then. But anyway, so he asked, "Have you converted?" And I said, "No, but I'm a Muslim at heart." Now, this little comment finished practically my entertainment career. I soon afterwards, my youth show sacked me after this very negative press campaign followed. They were saying, "Oh, has she lost the plot? Is she now supporting terrorism? Is she going to move to Pakistan and wear a burqa?" All this sort of stuff. And it was very traumatic because, I was this award-winning TV presenter. I won all these, the equivalent of the BAFTA awards in Germany and various other awards. And I had experienced 7 years of positive press, and suddenly they were after me like nothing else. And then, although I had a freshly signed contract, I was sacked. And what had I done? Nothing. I didn't even wear hijab then, So that was quite traumatic, and and ever since, so I realized very quickly, how much Islamophobia there is, how little people know about Islam. And the TV agents advised me at the time, if I ever wanted to work in Germany again, I better keep quiet about Islam. So I, shortly afterwards, I actually did convert, and I also kept quiet about Islam. I studied the faith for another 10 years, and, really internalized it. And but meanwhile, every time I looked at the media, I saw Islam depicted in a way that I couldn't recognize this beautiful faith that I found. And and even now, I mean, we see what's going on with the protests around the film, etc. I mean, everywhere. I went on a chat show only yesterday about, the terrible Muslims, and is the terror dangerous? How dangerous is the Islamist terror, etc., etc. And, and it just pained me seeing this ignorance, seeing this Islamophobia. So I wanted to make my contribution. I was itching to make my contribution. And this is the answer to the question. I wanted to show through my book, the beautiful values of Islam that I had discovered. And I wanted to, and I'm taking the reader by the hand as I dissolve my own prejudices against Islam to show them what a beautiful religion it is. And so, I'm aiming to build some bridges with this book and perhaps also inspire people to their own faith, even Muslims perhaps to their own faith, and people in general to discover their spiritual side, So that's why I wrote the book.
That's very interesting. And I think what is very apparent in this book, and what's particularly riveting about it, is that you are an insider in the epitome of a Western lifestyle, and then you become an insider in a totally different value system. And what I would like to know is that when you went from, the it girl, so to speak, to put it that way, to being a more devout Muslim, how difficult was that transition for you?
Babe to burqa, as Bob Geldof
Yes.
Quoted on the book. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, No one becomes an angel overnight. You just can't do it. It was, and remember, I did everything voluntarily. I didn't convert for anybody, because I actually converted when my friendship with Imran was finished.
Oh.
And then, so I just submitted slowly, or surrendered slowly to God, voluntarily. As I learned more, I surrendered more. I mean, my first Ramadan, for example, was a bit of a disaster, because I was out clubbing the night before, and had a glass or two of champagne, and the next day I lay in bed with a pounding headache, completely dehydrated, around lunchtime I gave up and said, Ramadan is not for me, And the following year, I had given up alcohol. And in fact, that year, I had to record twice as many programs. Every day, from morning to night, I was recording, because it was around Christmas time. I had a new show by then on another channel. And in order to have a break, we recorded 2 shows per day. So I thought, how am I ever going to do this without drinking, a glass of water in between, or a cup of tea, And subhanAllah, I tried, and God helped. And it worked. I was always able to speak, without even any water in between. So alhamdulillah. So you see, it's a process. And since then, I've managed every single Ramadan. And every time now, as it gets longer, I do wonder, oh my God, how am I going to make it, But alhamdulillah, flying through them.
So what brought you to Islam in the first place? Since, from the earlier parts of your book, it's quite evident that you lived a life that could be said to be far from Islam.
Quite. Very far from Islam. It was that, God had sent me, introduced me basically to a Muslim. I mean, I didn't meet any Muslims at all while I was working on MTV, but through a friend, I eventually, at this dinner party, I met Imran Khan, who was in the process of finding his own faith at the time. He had just won the World Cup for Pakistan in '92, which I knew nothing about, because as a German, I wasn't raised with cricket, so it totally passed me by. Anyway, so it was really, and he had a very different value system. We had discussions, debates, and his viewpoint was so different. It was obviously informed by his faith. and it challenged me. So, so we met up, we chatted, and he just had this very different viewpoint on women's issues. Say on the first, evening out, I turned up in a short mini dress, and he said, "Oh, would you mind keeping on your coat all night? Because, in our culture, women don't show flesh." So,
just to ask you this, sorry, because I read that passage and I was struck by it, because this was at Annabelle's, I understand?
Yeah, we went to Annabelle's.
You went to Annabelle's afterwards. So the idea is that you wore a coat on the dance floor / bar of Annabelle's the whole night.
I know, can you imagine?
What, as an observer, as a reader, it struck me as a bit hypocritical. Like, if you're going to a bar in the first place and then to quibble, didn't it rather than be impressed, did you not find that hypocritical or a bit invasive?
No, I didn't think like that. No, because he was with Muslims and people from his culture, I guess, and he felt embarrassed, I suppose, me showing my legs, like I was like it was the fashion at the time. So I didn't mind, I'm an easygoing type. So it was fine. But I certainly remember that. And you see, in the entertainment business, as you know, it's all about if you've got it, flaunt it. Yes. And here I was learning suddenly the idea of modesty, and talking to him more about it, actually. I agreed, why should a woman with her allure advertise, for example, any kind of product, from car tires to cigarettes to alcohol, it's degrading, whereas the Islamic idea that, you're recognized for your deeds, for your soul, for your mind, is far more dignified for a woman. So, when we really talked about it, it began to make sense, the Islamic point of view, in this respect, for example. And slowly, others came as well, So then he gave me a lot of books to read. And the first book fascinated me. Actually, I always had an interest in philosophy. And, and I guess also in spirituality. I just didn't know anything about it. So when suddenly I learned, and I read more, and I discussed also with other Muslims I met, it all began to make, it made me curious, it made sense, and I wanted to learn more. Of course, I was still working on MTV, and, so it was a gradual process, basically, that began. And then I traveled to Pakistan, and I was just stunned by the architecture, the beauty of the Mughal architecture, and I felt, wow, there must be something behind this, something great behind it. But also it was the people who I met, the people with their humility and dignity despite at times dire poverty, in the mountains of Pakistan, for example. And yet they were so generous, and hospitable, inviting us always for tea and whatever it was they had, despite their poverty. And it really made me reevaluate my life, made me rethink. I had some sort of key experiences as I was shuttling back and forth in between Pakistan and the West. For example, after my first trip to Pakistan, I went straight to the MTV Video Music Awards, where everybody was, surgically enhanced, put it that way, and it felt so fake compared to, those people I met in Pakistan. And they were authentic and real and warm, So anyway, but really it was then an intellectual journey started.
What I found very interesting is not only does your book talk about the early mid-90s MTV life, but actually it touches on, for a lot of people in the Pakistani scene, a very interesting, passionate part of the Pakistani life when, for instance, Imran Khan was this returning hero. He was fundraising for the hospital. Yeah. This was, perhaps you capture in your book the best of what we love about Imran Khan as a returning hero who is fundraising for his hospital. And I'd just like you to talk a bit more about that, because those passages really struck me, that his single-minded commitment to the hospital and how you were by his side, and understanding that he had to put everything before his duty. And how did it affect you,
He had to put his duty before everything.
Exactly.
So his mission was number one, and is number one, has always been number one, basically, you see.
And I'm sure that must have been a very admirable quality to see somebody so single-minded.
Absolutely, of course, completely. I mean, it was touching also to see how he was helped by an army of volunteers, you know, to build this hospital project. And in Pakistan, it was always people pressing a few rupees into his hands, you know, and he was saying, it's the poor people who build this hospital, not the rich. You know, and I was really touched by this friendship and faith that I saw him experiencing as he was doing this work for God. And now when I experience it myself, you know, that people come to help me and volunteer to help me with my projects and so on, you know, speaking engagements and this and that, I'm now touched, you know, because it's again this friendship and faith. You help someone else just for the sake of God. You know, that didn't exist in my showbiz world, say, you know, or just in the world out there. You know, it's a very beautiful quality, a very beautiful aspect of being a Muslim and being part of this Muslim community, say.
What's very interesting, what emerges is that you somehow go against the trend. You know, you were at the top, and in a way, so many people joke about Pakistan that it turns off them from Islam, whereas in fact for you, it seems that Pakistan, you know, brought you closer to Islam, which is a very unique story because that's not something we hear too often in the media. And I feel, you know, we've got a gist of it, but you say, and you said earlier on that you almost lost your career becoming a Muslim. You know, you were in a very real way a martyr for the religion, you know, in this way. I mean, I'm
still alive.
No, but it martyred him in many different ways.
Yeah, thank you.
So, is there anything that you've gained beyond spiritual awareness? How has the community, the peoplehood, everybody, how have they absorbed you in the community? What have you gained from this experience, apart from a relationship with the Almighty?
But that is not just a part, it's just not a bygone, you know. That is actually the number one thing I've gained, you see. That is the most important gain is that inner relationship with God. You know, the fact that God is always there, the fact that, you know, that enormous source of strength that this faith gives me. And the sweetness, you know, the mercy, the sweetness, the blessings, you see, and that inner focus. You see, before I always had a feeling of emptiness somehow. There was something missing. Even I had it as a young person back in Germany, you know, and I always felt I was born too late. I would have liked to have been born in the 60s when people, you know, demonstrated for things on the street, you know, and you know, they were fighting for things, they had a cause. We lived a very cushy, cozy life in the 80s, say, and so it was not satisfactory entirely. And you know, and now I can say this emptiness has been filled with meaning, with a focus, you know, with a purpose, and that is very, very satisfying. Apart from that, it's the friendship and faith that I was explaining just now. You know, that I really, really love. That you are connected. You feel this invisible connection between people, although you don't know each other sometimes. But say, you know, I have these amazing incidents with certain people, how you connect and they suddenly know about things, or they write to me, say an email about something I just asked for myself. There's the answer, and things like that happen. You know, you strike these friendships and faith. Which is
just to touch on a bit on that. So, you know, I don't know how to put it, the MTV and the Mecca lifestyle. Let's use your terminology. So in the MTV lifestyle, did you feel the friendships you had then were more superficial? Because
yes,
you obviously have Bob Geldof. You've obviously acquired a lot of respect from people. I mean, if you look at your book, you have Bob Geldof, Imran Khan, Imran Khan, Jim Kerr, all of these guys endorsing you. So you obviously made your mark. So did you?
Thank you.
So did you feel your friendships that somehow qualitatively changed when you went into your Mecca phase?
Well, I mean, I must say, you know, those friends who have given quotes to my book and have supported me are real friends, you know, and I have a number more, also from the entertainment business, of course, you know. And I'm very happy that most of them came to the launch, you know, where you were as well. And,
yes, it was a brilliant launch.
And
actually,
the fun thing was that, actually talking about it, you know, that we had people from the MTV life
exactly,
and the Mecca life. And when, you know, so that was really a rarity. It doesn't happen often that everybody...
Actually, why don't we see some of the clips from that amazing launch? There were quite a few that took place. Notable among them was the one in Momo's, and the day before at the House of Lords in Parliament. So there was that week was really Kristiane's Becca's week.
I was born in Germany but lived most of my life in London, and I'm a Muslim. I decided to convert to Islam as a European woman because the more I studied the faith, the more I realized it could give me the peace and meaning I'd always felt was missing from my life. I've written about the experience of my spiritual and intellectual awakening, my conversion, and how it is possible to be a European Muslim in my book, From MTV to Mecca.
As you can see, it was a pretty spectacular party. I can vouch for that myself. It was one of the funnest parties I've been to all summer. And what I found really interesting, Kristiane, is that you say from MTV to Mecca, but when we see the clips from the party, it doesn't seem that you've altogether abandoned MTV, but instead you've achieved a sort of Sufistic fusion of your life, which is incredible. How do you manage that? I mean,
yeah, no, it really was incredible. Well, you see, this is it. Some people, even in the, say, from the entertainment business, from MTV, people I met during those times, are also on a spiritual path, you know. They've also moved on. They're also asking deeper questions. So, of course, even people from my childhood, friends from my childhood, you know, and with those people, I still connect on that level, and we exchange ideas and so on, you know. So I'm not someone who has just, you know, now feels bad about my former life. No, I'm actually really grateful. And I'm so happy I met everybody. And if I would meet anybody on the street, like I seem to sometimes bump into Bob Geldof because he lives nearby, you know, or anybody else, of course we have a chat. And I was really chuffed he came and made that huge effort to support me at the party, you know, and just to be there. And I was happy so many of my new friends came as well. So it's great, you know. You are really a collection of your experiences. You know, it makes you what you are now. Also your past experiences.
It's very obvious that you love being a Muslim, and that Islam for you in a lot of ways is about the inner love. So in a way, I just want to kind of get from you a clearer sense. What is it especially that you like about being a Muslim, apart from the relationship to God? But why not go?
Don't say apart. That's the number one. That's the only thing, you know.
But
that's
for instance, I assume you were born a Catholic or Lutheran.
No, actually Protestant. Yeah, as a Lutheran Protestant.
As a Lutheran Protestant, why, for instance, did you choose a Muslim path as opposed to just deepening yourself in the Protestant faith? What?
You see, at the time, I can only say, sadly, I lost it. I lost my religious path, you know, as I was a teenager and then a twin. You know, the church sadly didn't really speak to me as I was, you know, growing up. I liked when I was little, the stories about Jesus and so on, but somehow, you know, the church tried it in ways to get customers that didn't work for me. They put ballet performances in the churches and rock concerts, but that's not a way to move people to God, you know, to inspire spirituality. And with Islam, I find, you know, it is a full-on religion. It's not something you just do on the side. You know, praying 5 times a day, standing 5 times in front of God. You know, it's like rejuvenating 5 times, recharging spiritually 5 times. That's a big thing. Or fasting for 1 month in Ramadan, and then celebrating Eid is very different to Christmas, which is, you know, mainly a consumer feast. I mean, when I was in America, the Christmas ads started in August. And, you know, I was so sick of them by the time it finally came. So it's I really feel that spiritual element is very, very deep. So you cultivate a close relationship with God when you practice Islam, and I like that. And it's all the time, like, what do I wear, how do I wash, what do I eat, the whole thing. It's a way of life, as you know. So why did this, you see, so I like the spiritual intensity, all the practices, but also for me intellectually it made sense. It may seem strange for any non-Muslim watching this, but when you look behind the headlines and when you actually make the effort to read a book about Islam, and a book written by an enlightened Muslim, who explains to you the concept, say, of the oneness of God, the Tawheed, that everything, God is the source of everything, and the destiny of everything, and that we're born, say, pure, not with original sin, say. And I mean, various things, you see, the doctrines, when you really look into it, they make sense, intellectual sense. We don't have anything like blind faith, it's a rational faith. You're asked to use your reason, and I like that. So I like it because also it's very holistic. You use your body when you pray. It's not just mental in your head. And you go on Hajj, which is, my God, I wrote a whole chapter on the Hajj, which is a real challenge on all levels. Very physical aspect of the faith. So I like that. I like the holistic aspect of it as well. And so much more. The arts, the music.
No, that's pretty overwhelming to hear, because when you live in Western society, when you live in a European context, all you hear is this barrage of angry Muslim, beards to their knees. So why hasn't this gentle message that you're espousing filtered to a larger society? What is the state of Islam in Europe at this point in time?
Well, I mean, let me tell you, I think the state of Islam in the world is this kind of Islam I'm talking about. That is the Islam of the majority. But the peace-loving, wonderful, righteous Muslims make no news. I mean, you don't sell news stories like that. So of course, then the tiny minority, 0.001 to 0.007% demonstrating on the streets, that's what you see, of course, because that's news. So we mustn't forget that it's only a tiny minority who behave so emotionally and unfortunately, very much against the teachings of our Prophet, peace be upon him, who always taught us to be patient, to be magnanimous, to pray for people who attacked him, and to repel a bad deed with something better. That's what the Quran tells us as well. Okay, now, so that's to the current crisis we're all experiencing. But generally, Islam in Europe, I think it's, it's growing. There are two trends. One that is most restrictive, no minarets are allowed, burqa is forbidden, halal, even, circumcision is a big issue in Germany, all sorts of things, more restrictions. But on the other hand, there's also a very positive trend because, you see Muslims succeeding more in mainstream society. Muslims, I mean, especially the UK, of course, is a leading light. That's why I live here. And anybody who complains, you should compare yourself to the rest of the world in the Western context. In the UK, we're really much better off. So there's an active Muslim scene, a creative scene, even the financial market, economy, the halal market. In fact, generally the halal market is worth a staggering 2.1 trillion US dollars a year. And it's growing by $500 billion a year. It's a massive market. It's halal financing, halal food, but also clothing, makeup, all sorts of things come into this. And it's all of this is also growing in Europe.
It's wonderful how you phrase it, a story of growth rather than fear, because obviously the mainstream press drives in the fear of Islam. But it's beautiful what you're saying about the growth of Islam. But you yourself has experienced firsthand Islamophobia. Your career, which was, you ran the Coca-Cola report. It was, as you can see from the earlier parts of this book, it was a runaway success. You were lauded by everyone. And you gave it all up. That's why I called you a martyr earlier on, simply because of Islamophobia.
Well, I didn't give it up. I was made to. I was made redundant, say, because I was a Muslim, and I guess in Germany they didn't like me as a Muslim to be on public television anymore. How nowadays I just get invited to chat shows sometimes to represent, you know, Islam, a moderate viewpoint of the majority. But yes, I tell you, it was traumatic, and I certainly never expected that to happen. I had absolutely, you know, no imagination. I couldn't imagine this would happen. And anyway, you know, I'm now working on developing a new TV program about the culture of Islam, contemporary Muslim culture, you know, featuring film, arts, fashion, finance, media, all sorts of things. I hope this will come off the ground, because that's exactly the kind of thing I'd like to do, and I really believe
really twins the two trends.
it does. And I believe, you know, we're coming with some good news. We have all that fear, we have all the terror, and you know, and the fear about that, and the restrictions. We need some good news. We need some, you know, we need to portray what we're really all doing, you know. We're 25% of the world population, you know, and everybody only ever knows about that fringe minority, that is extremists, you know. Let's the majority show what we're all about. So that's what I'm trying to do with this new TV show, inshallah.
Inshallah. And finally, what has been the reception to your book? Has it been, you know, have people been positive about it? Have some people been upset that somehow, you know, why are you talking about the earlier parts of your, you know, the more conservative elements? What is the reaction that you've been seeing?
That's a very good question. You know what? Some people actually have told me. I mean, very few people. Yeah, you know, as a conservative Muslim now, as a practicing Muslim, you shouldn't be mentioning, you know. But otherwise, it's not a journey. I mean, if I'm, you know, from Mecca to Mecca, it's not a journey. You know, I had to talk, and I talk with moderation. You know, it was very much, you know, what do I say, what do I not say? I don't dish the dirt on any celebrities as such. It's not a book about gossip. I always had the purpose of the book in mind, you know, when deciding what to put in and what not to put in. So, you know, to show also if a woman at the forefront of the entertainment business, you know, can find her happiness in Islam, obviously there must be something to it, you know. So that's why, to also to be honest. And it's the truth, and it's more interesting that way, you know, and it's inspirational, more inspirational as well, I think. So the reception, alhamdulillah, was really good. We have so far 3 reviews on Amazon, 3 really good reviews, alhamdulillah. In Germany also, you know, because the book came out actually in German in 2009, and then the paperback came out, and then the Dutch version. And so far, thanks to God, you know, it was really well received. Allahu Akbar, the azan. So yeah, you know, very, very, and then, you know, it's so touching for me to read letters of people who have read the book and who say, you know, it's really inspired me. A few people have even converted to Islam. You know.
Oh wow, that's
Muslims,
that's dawah. So.
Yeah, I hope so. You know, and Muslims also, you know, who say, oh, I was just on the way to the petrol station to buy myself a bottle of wine, but when I read your book and that you gave it all up, I decided, you know, this person also decided now to give it all up, and you know, so that's very satisfying and really touching. And I pray for everybody, you know, to benefit, and for God to guide people, you know.
That's beautiful. I mean, I think, yeah, unfortunately, our time for chai has come to an end, but we've had a very interesting, stimulating discussion. All that I would like to thank Kristiane, and I'd like to thank TV Apex as well. And all that I can say, this is a must-read. It's an inspirational, it's an honest book. It doesn't try to, you know, hide away from the truth in any way. And it really is something...
The good and the bad.
The good and the bad. And it enriches your life having read it. It certainly did for mine. I'd like to thank you very much and hope to see you soon.